Hi, everyone. This is Ed DaCosta, an executive coach. Remember that success is a choice. What choices will you make today?
Providing insights to help you grow your business, improve yourself, and add value to those around you. You're listening to the Success is a Choice podcast, where you get a peek into the lives of industry leaders as they share their stories with you.
Welcome to Success is a Choice podcast. I'm your host, Jamy Bechler. And today we have Chris Rollins joining us. Chris is the president of the Rollins Performance Group, Incorporated. As a master trainer in the DISC model of human behavior and a founding partner with the global John Maxwell Team, Chris uses his 3C model of performance to address the crucial areas of communication, leadership, and sales that every organization must address in order to achieve massive and sustainable top and bottom line growth. We are pleased to have Chris Rollins joining us today. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jamie. Glad to be here.
Well, Chris, we mentioned a lot of things there in that intro, but if you could give us a little bit more of a snapshot into your background and maybe fill in the gaps for us a little bit.
Well, my background, I spent 9 years in the military on tanks, so in the Army. And after I got out of that, spent about 16 years in the corporate arena in the rental industry across the U.S. Left that in 2013, early 2013, so about 5 years ago now. And we started Rollins Performance Group, where we really focus primarily on communication, leadership, and sales. And that's what we do today. I focus more in the arena, working with the corporate environment as far as, whether it's speaking or training, but it really is all focused on, helping people achieve sustainable growth. One of the funny things I always tell people, Jamie, is that when people get and they get that image, if you will, of a roller coaster, right? The roller coaster's fun when you've got your kids at the theme park on the weekend. It's not fun when you're standing in front of the board giving your review, and that's your financial. So it's about achieving that sustainable growth that gets you off the roller coaster, if you will, and allows you to begin to achieve exponential growth.
You mentioned that you were in the armed forces, the military. How did those experiences prepare you for what you're doing now?
Well, I think more than anything else, obviously as a young guy that went into the military, it helped us to push on understanding the objective that you have and, achieving the mission, right? We always talk about mission first, but so there was a lot that it really helped me to learn whenever I was learning about, getting and accomplishing what was at hand. But also more than anything else, I think the biggest thing that the military taught me was that it's a team effort. So many people look today at the movies that I always talk about, and I always use Rambo as the lovely example. And everybody looks at him and sees the one guy standing out there in a field with a 50 cal on his hip, mowing down 500 enemy combatants, and they say, "Wow, I could go do that too." And everybody that's ever served in the military looks at that and says, "That dude's dead in 30 seconds in the real world." Right? That's not how we fight. We're the greatest fighting force on the planet because we fight as a unit, and I think that's one of the biggest keys that often is overlooked when people translate from the military perspective into the civilian mindset of what we do in business, is that we are not designed to do this alone. And so it really translates from both perspectives very well.
The name of this podcast is Success is a Choice, and wondering, how do you define and measure success?
Well, it's an interesting question, Jamie. How would I define and measure success? Now, funny enough, I would almost have to think two things come to mind when you say that, because earlier in my career, I defined success different than I do today. And, again, let's translate back to going way back there in my time in the military. But success, oftentimes there, I really focused on the objective. And if the objective was being met, that was success. So even as I came out of the military and got into the corporate world, I achieved some great results. I was working for a national organization, quickly was running, a large group, if you will, multiple locations across multiple states, achieved number one in the company, and, we were just killing it. Now, unfortunately, and this is not a proud moment I'm going to share, but I ran over some good people along the way, right? It was mission first. That was the mindset. And I had a VP earlier in my career who through the years became an amazing mentor to me, that really one day told me, said, Chris, this isn't the Army. They don't have to come back tomorrow morning. And it really helped me to shift my mindset. But I went from a place where I was defining success based on achieving the objective to defining success based upon helping others begin to achieve the potential that they have. Ultimately, what I learned through that process was that the end result for me ended up being much better when I focused more on helping others achieve their goals as well, because again, it brought exponential results. So many people look for what they can achieve, and that's success. But if you really look at what you can help others achieve, of course, oftentimes we use the term that moves from success to significance, but that significance really exemplifies the success. So when people often, look at that, when you say success is a choice, do you want to achieve individual success or do you want to achieve your group success? And that's really where you're going to get the end result that most people want.
I'm sure a lot of your philosophies, as well as a lot of my philosophies, have been the origins are some John Maxwell leadership principles, and you are a founding member of John Maxwell Team. Talk a little bit about when you first got introduced to John Maxwell's concepts of leadership and why you wanted to join the John Maxwell Team.
Funny enough, I love to read, and I read a lot, but it was, I want to say 2005, probably, when I first got introduced into the leadership realm of reading. I'd read some books on management that I think we called leadership at the time, but I really got introduced, and it was a book that I think you're probably familiar with, but Good to Great by Jim Collins, and really revolutionized my whole mindset into learning about leadership. And then I think, if memory serves me right, it was probably 2009, maybe, give or take, that I first had read one of John's books. Now, I'd heard of John for a long time. I knew who he was, was somewhat familiar with him. But I got a copy of his book, Leadership Gold, which was actually the first of his books that I'd read at the time. And today I've read, I don't know, well over 50 of his books. But and I read Leadership Gold, and I connected with John through LinkedIn, which is an area that I'm very passionate about. But it was from that he posted about a call he was having, and I'll never forget it. March 2nd, 2011. It was the day the John Maxwell Team was born, and I was out of town. He had a call scheduled from like 7 to 9 at night. I was in the hotel room. I listened to John, some guy by the name of Paul Martinelli I'd never heard of, and they talked about an idea, more than anything else, Jamie. They were going to do this. They were going to build this curriculum. They were going to build this site. They were going to have some resources available. They were going to do this. They were going to do that. And I got off the call, and then I called my wife and said, "Oh my gosh, I've got to do this, honey. It just really resonated with me." And she said, "Well, tell me about it." I said, "They're going to do this. They're going to do that. They're going to do that." Notice the key word I keep saying. She said, "How much is it?" She said, "You're going to spend how much for a gunna?" Right? And I said, "But honey, it's John." And I look back at that. So I joined the day they launched the team, when, there were a handful of people, and it was just this idea. I had no idea where it was going to go, but I was committed to the process. But along the way, I think the biggest impact that it made for me personally was not the content. I mean, obviously the content's second to none, right? I mean, it's world-class content, and having the name recognition of John has helped in many ways along the way. But I think more than anything else, the experience that I had as I've seen that team grow from a handful of people to 16,000 plus worldwide today was really more of the mindset. And keep in mind, I'll go back and tie this to what I was explaining when I talked about my military experience, where one of the big failures that I find that people have when they become a statistic in business. We know so many people start in business and how many businesses fail within the first 3 to 5 years of their existence. And they all start from someone who's doing something and they think, I've got some experience with this, or I've got this really good skill and I can translate this. So rather than working for someone else's dream, I'm going to go out and work for my dream. I can do this on my own. That's where the flaw is. That's the kink in the armor, if you will, that really helps set people up for failure, is thinking they can do it alone. We weren't designed and we weren't created to do it alone. So what the team really helped me understand along the way is that there is strength in being independent, but there is massive weakness in being alone. So it allows us the ability to go out and build our business and do the things that we want to do as an independent business owner. But we also have that support structure. We have that network so that we're not doing it alone. Again, it goes right back to tying to the experience that I had in the military, that we're not trying to do something by ourselves and alone, but we're utilizing others around us so we're, again, able to be independent without being alone. That's the biggest thing that I've taken away from my time on the team over the last nearly 7 years now.
Well, you use a lot of you're a master trainer. You use a lot of the DISC personality assessments. For those not very familiar with that, what are those assessments and why are those important?
Well, the DISC assessment, obviously, I think more than anything else, it goes back. William Marston created the DISC model back in the 1920s, but the science behind it goes way back further than that. I mean, it was probably 400 BC when Hippocrates really started with the study and the science of the 4 temperaments, which is really what just about every personality piece of science, if you will, has been built upon throughout the years. I often, more than even personalities, I refer to it more as communication style. What Dr. Marston used when he created the DISC model was the model of human behavior. It's why people communicate the way they do and why people react the way they do. And the science behind it is simply this, that we all have predictable patterns of behavior. Where I see people mess up when it comes to communication styles and that type of training is they use it as a model to label people or to pigeonhole people or to put people in a box, and where they try to get people to think I'm either one or another. I'm this or that, so to speak, when in truth we are all a unique blend of all the styles. But there is something to be said that even though we can adjust and we can manage to the different situations around us, we have a unique way that our DNA is wired where we just tend to, on cruise control, if you will, we wish to act and respond in a certain way. Where the model comes in to play and where it's so important, and I think about how I apply it back to the business concept so much, is that when I am trying to understand someone from a perspective of DISC, again, it's not about labeling them, it's about understanding them. And what I found along the way through years of doing this, let me relate this to the sales environment, is that unless people know better, what they find is that about half of a person's sales process, be it in a particular sales role or just selling in your business market, about half of the sales that someone makes goes to someone who shares the similar personality style or communication style as their primary trait. The reason that is because they're naturally talking that person's language. So the barrier to entry, if you will, is automatically lower. They have to overcome that when they're speaking to people of the other communication styles. So the struggle with that comes in that about half of their sales, if you will, comes to the other 3 styles combined. I'll give you an example, Jamie. I was working with an auto group, and so I said, okay, well, if you're what we call a D personality style, you're a driven communication style, which is my primary style. about half of your sales comes to someone else that has a driven communication style. So I got a group of sales reps said, well, that's because they're the ones making the purchasing decisions. They're the ones buying. I said, so you're telling me that an inspiring, supportive, or a cautious person doesn't drive a car? They all drive cars. That's crazy to even think that way. And so then I would look at the inspiring salesperson, and about half of their sales was to people that were also inspiring. And what that meant was the other half of their sales going to the other three styles, they were leaving about 50% of their potential sales on the table just because they weren't bridging the gap. They weren't connecting. When you brought up the 3C model of performance, and I'll put that in a nutshell, but it's communicate, connect, convert. And I see so many people communicate in order to convert, and they're skipping the key ingredient of connection. And the connection is where they double their sales. So even as much as I focus on sales development and sales training, if people are looking to develop their sales skills, the communication piece in order to connect is a key bridge to help someone massively improve their sales results on a consistent basis. So, more than anything else, when I look at someone utilizing that process, it's saying, okay, how can I learn to assess someone when I meet them, identify their style, and respond in a way that they want me to respond to them? It's what we often call the platinum rule. Rather than treating people the way I want to be treated, which we call the golden rule, the platinum rule is treating people the way they want to be treated. And when we do that, we connect at a higher level. We communicate more effectively, we lead more effectively, and we sell more effectively.
We'll return to our interview with Chris Rollins in just a moment. Chris and I are both John Maxwell certified leadership coaches, and we both think a great deal of John Maxwell and his impact on the world. He has written more than 100 books, and now our friends at Audible are offering our listeners a chance to download a free John Maxwell audiobook when you visit the website audibletrial.com/success is a choice. You should be able to find a book that suits your interest from their collection of more than 180,000 titles. Once again, download a free John Maxwell leadership book at audibletrial.com/success is a choice. And now back to our interview with Chris Rollins. Well, and even John Maxwell has a great book, Everybody Communicates But Few Connect. And that's so true, whether it's in our personal lives, whether it's in our business environments. So I love what you're saying there, Chris.
Oh, absolutely.
You work with a lot of companies. You also work with a lot of individuals, and you're trying to help them all become more successful as salespeople. What are some common behaviors or mistakes that you're seeing people make that limit their ability to either make sales or maybe just be more persuasive in their lives?
Jamy, there's I think several things you said there in that question. But it's funny enough that even when I work with companies and individuals, or if we would apply the term entrepreneur maybe into that category, there are two totally different mindsets and two things often there that I see that hold people back. From a company perspective, probably the biggest challenge that I often see is the struggle with overcoming the status quo, because oftentimes what the company sees is this is the way things have been done, right? I always call it steering the Titanic. and it sometimes is so slow to change. And people are nervous to rock the boat because what happens if I fail? Let me give you an example sometimes. So if I would go in and meet with a sales manager, right? So I do a lot of sales, so I deal with sales managers. And I ask the question, well, how many of your reps missed their quota last year? Give me a number, or a percentage, raw number, whatever it is, right? And they'll give me a number. And oddly enough, I'll follow up with a second question. How many of your reps are on pace to miss their quota this year? Now, Jamy, I could tell you when I ask that, it never ceases to amaze me how similar the two numbers are. It just almost blows me away. And then I ask someone the simple third question, what are you doing to change that? Or should I introduce you to a good resume coach I know, right? It really is what it boils down to, is you've got to begin to shift and you've got to take something. But in an organization, when you can help someone identify the goal they're trying to achieve, their present place where they are at, and now define the gap. When you can do that, they realize this is the gap where we're at. This is the investment we're going to need to make to close that gap. That's the ROI. They can calculate it from there. Then they make the decision and they take action. So that's the thing that you see in a company. When I work with individuals, entrepreneurs, they often take a different mindset. They don't approach it from that perspective. I countless times will run into entrepreneurs that say, this is where I'm at. This is not working. We help them define where they want to be, where they are. They see the gap. They can quantify the gap. They can understand what they need to do to close the gap. They know the investment. They know the ROI. You can do all those same numbers. And then they say, well, let me wait 6 to 12 months and see if it gets better. And then if it gets better, I'm going to make that investment. And it's the number one killer of small businesses. It's the reason that so many businesses fail. I truly think it's a big part of why businesses have that 3 to 5 year failure rate, is because so many of them see the gap and they're basically relying on hope and saying, well, if it gets better, then I'll make the investment. In the company, once they've realized that gap, they take action, because then they know I've got to fight the status quo. And I see a different mindset when it comes to entrepreneurs. They tell me what I'm doing is not working. You help them understand the change where they need to get to. And then they say, yep, that's what it is. I'm going to see if something gets better. And that mindset is really what kills them. You know, the number one killer of small businesses in America today is not profit. It's not. You can take a P&L statement and I could take $100 in revenue, and as long as I don't spend anything, let's say I control my expenses to $99, then I show in the black on a P&L statement. I got a $1 profit, but you and I both know that $1 doesn't pay the bills. The number one killer of small businesses in America today is revenue. It's cash flow. And that's what people have to focus on. I rarely ever see businesses grow themselves into failure. So yes, I know there's mismanagement and whatever, and that can sometimes happen. But by and large, by a far majority, the number one thing that kills people is not growing their revenue, not bringing in the cash flow. So that's what I see in the differences when I work with companies and individuals as far as being successful. But I think you also asked, from a sales perspective, the number one thing that I see across the board is that people really misunderstand what sales really is. I talk to so many people, Jamy, who, when I ask them, what do you do? They say, I'm in sales, and it's almost like their head dips. I don't know why that mindset is, but I think that mindset is because so many people see sales as manipulative. And truly, sales, if it's done right, is the most ethical thing you can do for someone. I often say that I model my life after the greatest salesman that ever walked the planet. His pitch was follow me. He changed the world. So when I look at that, I really think that sales is what you can do for someone, not what you're doing to them. But what sales really is not convincing someone. That's where people begin to cross the line. When we try to sell someone, our goal is simply to bring them to the point of an informed decision and to get them to take action. Either way, whether they say yes or whether they say no, is not something that we're tied to. But from the sales perspective, from a salesperson's point of view, I'd much rather know that the answer is no, because now my time can be spent somewhere else rather than constantly chasing someone who's thinking about it, right? Success is a choice. That's the podcast, but it's a decision that has to be made. And when someone does not make a decision by default, they're making a decision. Their choice is to make no choice. And when they do that, they're setting themselves up for massive failure. Now, when it comes to being persuasive, I really think a lot about that is that it goes back to what I was talking about DISC, is learning to adapt to a prospect's communication style, not to their own. I know you recently interviewed Jeff Raver on one of your podcasts, and Jeff and I actually put together a sales skill assessment tool. One of the sales skills that we identified for peak performers in the sales arena is that they listen to learn. So many salespeople today go into a sales call, if you will, or they go into a meeting with someone with a predetermined objective. And the problem is when they walk in with a predetermined objective, their mind is made up on what they're going to offer before they ever even get there. Now, they might ask some questions, they might let you talk, but regardless of what you do, they already know where they're going to go. In that case, they're not listening to learn, they're just listening to respond. Then they're going through the motions. But when you truly listen to learn, you engage the prospect, and the prospect tells you what is important to them, what they need, and then you determine how you can help them if you can. And I think one of the greatest things we can ever do for someone in the world of ethical selling is say, that's great. I love what you brought to the table. And if you can't help them, you just let them know. I'm not probably the person for you. That's okay, because none of us are going to be for everyone. And then you move on. So you get more persuasive when you learn to use the skill, listen to learn. I know Jeff and I identified 24 skills in that assessment, but the one there that I think about being persuasive is listening to learn rather than listening to respond.
Yeah, that's great. And Jeff Raver is episode 35 of the Success is a Choice podcast. Definitely recommend that. He's also another John Maxwell Team member, and has some great things about sales. But, you're right. Sales gets this negative connotation or this perception, but sales doesn't have to be that way. And I love your insights on that. Thanks, Chris. John Maxwell wrote many books, but two of them kind of two that come to mind dealt with failure. One was called Failing Forward, and another was called Sometimes You Win, Sometimes You Learn. What have been some learning opportunities you've had? Maybe a favorite failure that you've had in your career?
I think more than anything else, well, that would be a long but distinguished list, Jamy. But if I think more than anything else, it's really that, in the industry where we're at, right? So when I do a lot of speaking and training, and I do a lot of work with companies, but I also do public seminars and workshops. And I think more than anything else, if I would look back, and there's not one I would trade. A lot of times people ask, what's the one you would change? I don't know that I would change any, because the failures brought tremendous learning opportunities. And if I were to exchange the failure, I would also have to trade the learning that came from it. But in filling a room is probably one of the biggest things that I get asked about from people that, they're starting off as speakers or trainers or whatever the case may be. And it is one of the things that people grossly underestimate the effort that it takes to get people in a room and to do whatever. And, I oftentimes talk to people who, they're working to fill a room, and they're setting up an event or something. And I say, great, when's your event? It's 4 weeks from now. When did you start it? 2 weeks ago. Uh-oh. And I've done that, right? So I think through the process of doing an event, hosting an event, putting it out there, not marketing it effectively, and definitely not giving it the amount of time that it takes to properly fill a room. I always kind of run by a rule. It's going to be a minimum, and I say minimum, could be more than that, of 90 days or more from the time that I decide to put on an event to where I can start promoting it and to host it. And when you would host an event and fail to fill the room, and you put it on anyway, and you deliver like there was 1,000 people in the room, and it costs you money, but you look at that, what you do there is that it teaches you, a lot of us hear the term to trust the process, and I think that's important, but it teaches you to honor the process. And, really more than anything else saying, this is what it's going to take to do that. Because one of the things I like about what you do on Success is a Choice is you interview people that consistently do it well. And there's got to be a theme that comes about, from talking to a group of people. And every one of them have learned along the way to honor the process. Because it's good to try new things, and we all try new things. And some of those new things will work, some of those new things won't work. But there are some things that are tried and true. They're just proven It's a scientific process, just like I'd say with DISC. They're proven, and you honor that process. So, like I said, for me, it's putting on an event, not giving it the amount of time that it should have, because I see so many people make that mistake. And then they get down when it doesn't work for them. But knowing that it takes effort. So many people, like I said, underestimate how hard it's going to be to do that. So I appreciate those failures. They help me learn not to do it that way going forward.
With your business and all the training that you're doing, what is an app or a tool or a piece of software that you would have a hard time living without?
Yeah, there are a lot of good ones. If I were to sit there and think on my phone, one that I access daily, I assume this is available on Android and iOS, but one that I use religiously is called Flipboard. And Flipboard is an app that I use because it really helps me from a content curation perspective to break down and stay abreast of all the things that I'm focused on in the area of looking at content. So what Flipboard does is it puts together a lot of different types of following blogs and the different things like that, but it does them by topic. So I keep abreast on a lot of things with LinkedIn. Again, I do a lot of LinkedIn training and development, so I always want to know, really the cutting edge of what's coming up and what's just been released in the market. So in Flipboard, I can go in and flip through the whole piece, but I can also search by all the topics of things that I keep up with. So I stay on top of technology trends. I focus on leadership. You can follow things that are trending in the speaking industry, things from sales, things from customer service, things from leadership, things from all the different things that we do. And it pulls in some of the best resources of what's out there in the marketplace. I am on my Flipboard app every day. And if I've got somewhere where I'm sitting and I've just got a few minutes of extra time, I'm pulling that up and, seeing the best of what's out there in those areas. And it puts it all in one place for me. So I would say that one is huge for me.
Chris, you mentioned LinkedIn a couple times. Where can people connect with you or learn more about you? Not only LinkedIn, but your website.
Obviously they can connect on LinkedIn. If they search Chris Rollins, I'm very findable. On Twitter, of course, it's at the Chris Rollins. And then our website is rollinsperformancegroup.com. That's really, probably the three best places I would say for people to go and find us there. But I am, religious, I guess, if you will, about what I do in my focus and my efforts on LinkedIn. As I tell people all the time, it is the number one business social network on the planet for a reason.
Well, we know that you're very busy working with companies and individuals to try to help them maximize their success. So we appreciate you taking a few minutes to join us today. Loved your insights, loved your perspective on things, and keep up the great work, Chris.
You bet. Thanks, Jamie.
It was nice having a founding member of the John Maxwell team on our show today. I appreciate Chris taking the time to join us. Remember that you can get a free audiobook download of a John Maxwell book at audibletrial.com/Success is a Choice podcast. Thanks for tuning in to today's show, and please take just a quick second to hit that little subscribe button if you haven't already done so. Thanks so much, and until next time, remember that success is a choice. What choice will you make today?